Listen, I thought I had seen everything in my 200 cycles serving the Galactic Defense Academy. Vorthon cadets who could bend metal with their minds? Check. Silari students who could phase through walls? Double check. But humans? Well, those weird little bipeds were supposed to be the comic relief of the Academy. Boy, was I wrong. My name is Commander Thek Vorlan, and I run security for the most prestigious military academy in 3 sectors. The Nexus Defense Academy sits on the moon of Kepler Prime, training the next generation of galactic peacekeepers. We get the best, the brightest, and occasionally the strangest species from across known space. That particular morning started like any other boring day. I was sipping my morning stimulant, watching the sunrise paint the Academy's chrome towers in shades of amber, when my comm unit started screaming like a banshee having a bad day. "Commander!" Lieutenant Zara's voice crackled through the speaker, panic dripping from every syllable. "We have a Code 7 breach in the East Wing." I nearly choked on my drink. Code 7? That was assassination-level threat? In my academy? Someone had serious nerve. "Details, Lieutenant," I barked, already reaching for my plasma rifle. "Unknown intruder, heavily armed, heading toward the human dormitory sector. Sir, they took out 3 security drones without breaking stride." The human dormitory. Of course. Humans might be physically weak compared to most species, but they had this annoying habit of making enemies. Their homeworld had been embroiled in conflicts for millennia before they discovered faster than light travel. Some folks in the galaxy still held grudges about humanity's rapid expansion. I grabbed my gear and sprinted toward the East Wing, my 4 legs carrying me faster than most bipeds could manage. The Academy's corridors were a maze of gleaming metal and energy conduits designed to confuse intruders. Fat lot of good that did today. As I rounded the corner to the human sector, I could hear the distinctive whine of energy weapons. Someone was having a very bad morning, and it wasn't going to be me if I could help it. The scene that greeted me was, well, let's just say it wasn't in any training manual. The corridor looked like a tornado had invited a plasma storm to dance. Scorch marks decorated the walls in abstract patterns, and 3 security drones lay in smoking heaps. Standing in the middle of this destruction was the intruder. 8 feet tall, covered in black tactical gear that screamed "professional killer," and carrying enough firepower to level a small building. The assassin species was hidden behind a full helmet, but the way they moved suggested military training. And there, pressed against the wall behind an overturned maintenance cart, was Cadet Jake Morrison. Now, Jake was what you might call an average human. Brown hair, brown eyes, about 6 feet tall with the kind of build that suggested he spent more time in the library than the gym. He was in his 2nd year, studying xenobiology and tactical analysis. Smart kid, but definitely not someone you'd expect to survive a professional hit. The assassin raised their weapon, a nasty-looking plasma cannon that could punch through battle armor like tissue paper. Jake's eyes went wide, and I could see him calculating his odds of survival. They weren't good. "Well, well," the assassin spoke in heavily accented Galactic standard, their voice modulated by the helmet's speakers. "Jake Morrison, son of Admiral Morrison, scourge of the Helix Nebula campaign. Ah, family drama, the worst kind of assassination motive. Jake, to his credit, didn't wet himself. Instead, he did something that made my scales tingle with disbelief." He smiled. "You know," Jake said, his voice steady despite the circumstances, "I was wondering when someone would finally show up. Took you long enough." The assassin paused. This clearly wasn't the reaction they expected. Your father destroyed my home colony, the killer continued, adjusting their aim. 30,000 Rakani civilians died in his orbital bombardment. Yeah, Jake nodded, still smiling that unsettling human smile. I know. He told me all about it. War crimes aren't really his style, but sometimes the galaxy forces your hand, right? I was creeping closer, trying to get a clean shot, but the assassin had positioned themselves perfectly. Any energy discharge would likely hit Jake, too. You mock my people's suffering? The assassin's voice rose an octave, anger bleeding through the modulator. Jake laughed, and the sound sent chills down my spine. Oh no, friend. I'm just wondering why you chose such a complicated plan. What was this human doing? Was he trying to talk his way out of execution? Humans were known for their gift of speech, but this seemed like a terrible time for negotiation. The assassin's finger tightened on the trigger. Complicated? Well, yeah. Jake gestured around the destroyed corridor. Breaking into a heavily fortified academy, fighting through security drones, tracking me down in my dorm. That's a lot of work just to kill one little human, don't you think? Your death will send a message to your father. Will it, though? Jake tilted his head, and I swear I could see gears turning behind his eyes. See? Here's the thing about Admiral Morrison. He's what we humans call emotionally unavailable. Terrible father, really. Missed my birthday parties. Never showed up to school events. Barely remembers my name half the time. The assassin hesitated. This was not going according to their plan. You think he'll care if I die? Jake continued, his tone conversational. He's got 4 other kids with 3 different wives. I'm just the disappointing middle child who chose xenobiology over military command. I had to admit, Jake was painting a compelling picture. Admiral Morrison was indeed known throughout the fleet as a cold fish who put duty before family. But what was the kid's endgame here? Besides, Jake added, leaning back against the wall like he was chatting with a friend at a cafe, killing me here creates some serious problems for you. Problems? The assassin's weapon wavered slightly. Oh, absolutely. First, you're on Academy grounds, which means this falls under Galactic defense jurisdiction. That's a death penalty offense in 17 systems. Second, you've damaged Academy property. Jake gestured at the destroyed drones. The repair costs alone will bankrupt your family for 3 generations. The assassin was definitely listening now. Humans, I reflected, were terrifyingly good at finding loopholes and complications in simple situations. But third, and this is the big one, Jake's smile widened, you've made a fundamental error in your intelligence gathering. What error? Jake pushed himself off the wall, taking a small step forward. The assassin's weapon tracked him, but they didn't fire. You assumed I was helpless. That's when things got interesting. Jake's hand moved faster than my eyes could follow, producing a small device from his jacket pocket. The device emitted a high-pitched whine, and suddenly the assassin's weapon went dead. The energy readings on my scanner dropped to 0. Electromagnetic pulse generator, Jake explained cheerfully. Built it in Advanced Technical Systems class. Shuts down any electronic device within a 10-meter radius. The assassin tried to fire their backup weapon. Click. Nothing. Yeah, that one too. Also your helmet's targeting system, communication array, and life support monitoring. You might want to breathe more carefully. That mask isn't filtering air anymore. I watched in fascination as the professional killer began to panic. Their movements became erratic, hands fumbling for manual backups that were also likely fried. Now, Jake continued, his voice taking on a harder edge. "Let's discuss your real problem." The assassin pulled a traditional blade, the kind that didn't rely on electronics. Smart move, but Jake seemed to have anticipated that too. "See? While you were busy making dramatic speeches about revenge and justice, I was doing what humans do best." Jake's smile turned predatory. "I was cheating." The corridor's lights suddenly dimmed, and emergency klaxons began wailing throughout the academy. Red warning lights bathed everything in an ominous glow. "You see," Jake explained over the noise, "when you breached the East Wing, you triggered about 30 different alarm systems. But those were just the obvious ones. The ones I've been quietly modifying all semester." My comm unit crackled to life. "Commander Vorlon, we have multiple security systems activating in your sector. Lockdown protocols engaging in 3, 2... The heavy blast doors at both ends of the corridor slammed shut with a resounding clang. We were sealed in. "Lockdown protocols," Jake nodded, approvingly. "Designed to contain threats until security can respond. Of course, the manual override is in the security booth down the hall, but good luck getting there." The assassins spun around, finally noticing that their escape routes had vanished. "But here's the really fun part," Jake continued, and I could hear the glee in his voice. "The lockdown system includes atmospheric controls." A new sound filled the corridor, a soft hissing that made my blood run cold. "Sleep gas," Jake explained. "Completely harmless, but very effective. The Academy uses it for riot control and subduing dangerous intruders. Takes about 2 minutes to knock out most species, maybe 3 for the really big ones." The assassins stumbled, their movements already becoming sluggish. The gas was working. "Of course," Jake added thoughtfully. "I've been taking immunity boosters all semester. Part of my xenobiology studies, you understand. Building up resistance to various atmospheric contaminants. I realized I should probably be worried about the gas myself, but my species had natural filters. The assassin, however, was clearly not so fortunate." "The best part is," Jake said, settling back against the wall to wait, "you came here to kill Admiral Morrison's disappointing son. But you just got outsmarted by a second-year cadet who spends his free time breeding bacteria and reading tactical manuals for fun." The assassin took one more swipe with their blade, but their coordination was shot. They missed Jake by a meter and stumbled into the wall. "Don't feel too bad about it," Jake called out as the killer slumped to their knees. "Humans have been disappointing their enemies for thousands of years. It's what we do." The assassin collapsed face first onto the corridor floor, their weapon clattering away harmlessly. Jake looked up at me, noticing my position for the first time. "Oh, hi, Commander Vorlon. Sorry about the mess. I was going to clean up after myself, but you know how it is with professional assassins. They never give you enough time to prepare properly." I stared at the human cadet, then at the unconscious assassin, then back at Jake. In all my years of Academy security, I had never seen anything quite like this. "Cadet Morrison," I said carefully, "did you just neutralize a professional assassin using homework assignments?" Jake shrugged, looking almost embarrassed. "Well, technically it was more like a collaborative effort between 3 different class projects and some creative interpretation of Academy safety protocols." "You modified the lockdown systems?" "Only a little. And I filed all the proper documentation with the engineering department." "Well, most of it. The important parts, anyway." I shook my head, trying to process what I had just witnessed. "How long have you been planning this?" "Planning what?" "Oh, you mean the anti-assassin protocols?" Jake scratched his head thoughtfully. "I started working on them about 6 months ago, after someone tried to poison my food in the cafeteria. Probably a different assassin. But you know what they say about preparation. Someone had tried to poison him 6 months ago, and he hadn't reported it. Cadet Morrison, why didn't you inform security about previous assassination attempts? Jake looked genuinely surprised by the question. Commander, with all due respect, my father has been making enemies for 30 years. If I reported every death threat, poisoning attempt, and suspicious accident, you'd need a whole department just to handle my paperwork. He said it so matter-of-factly that I almost missed the implications. This kid had been dealing with assassination attempts for months, maybe years, and he'd just accepted it as part of his daily routine. Besides, Jake continued, it seemed like a good opportunity to field test some defensive strategies. You can't really simulate a genuine murder attempt in classroom exercises. The blast doors cycled open with a pneumatic hiss, and my security team poured into the corridor, weapons drawn and ready for battle. They stopped short when they saw the scene. One unconscious assassin, one completely calm human cadet, and their commander standing in the middle looking like he'd been hit by a transport shuttle. Situation contained, I announced weakly. Prisoner for processing. Lieutenant Zara approached cautiously, her weapon still drawn. Sir, what happened here? I looked at Jake, who was now examining the unconscious assassin with scientific interest. The human happened, Lieutenant. And that was just the beginning. 3 hours later, I was sitting in my office nursing a triple-strength stimulant and trying to explain to Admiral Kex Thornwall why one of our cadets had just humiliated the Rakani Syndicate's best assassin. The Admiral's blue skin was turning an alarming shade of purple, which meant he was either impressed or about to have an aneurysm. Let me understand this correctly, Admiral Thornwall said slowly, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence. Cadet Morrison anticipated the assassination attempt? Not exactly anticipated, sir. More like prepared for the inevitable. Jake sat across from my desk, looking perfectly relaxed despite being the target of a murder plot. He was munching on some kind of human snack food, the crunching sound oddly comforting in the tense atmosphere. Sir, Jake interjected between bites, if I may clarify? I've been tracking 17 different assassination plots against me over the past year. This was actually number 12 on my priority list. Admiral Thornwall's eye stalks nearly fell out of his head. 17 plots? Well, 18 now. I got a message this morning from the Vegan Mining Consortium. Apparently, they're upset about something my father did during the border wars. Jake shrugged. I've scheduled them for next month. They seem more polite than most. I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache coming on. Cadet, you've been scheduling assassination attempts? It's just basic time management, Commander. You can't handle multiple murder plots efficiently without proper organization. Jake pulled out a small data pad. See? I've got them color-coded by threat level, species of origin, and preferred killing method. The Admiral leaned forward, morbid curiosity overcoming his shock. What's your highest priority threat? Jake scrolled through his list. The Hegemony of Scales. They're planning something involving orbital bombardment of the Academy. Should happen sometime next week, if my calculations are correct. My stimulant cup slipped from my suddenly numb fingers. Orbital bombardment? Oh yes, very thorough species, the Hegemony. When they want someone dead, they don't mess around with individual assassins. They prefer the glass, the entire continent approach. Admiral Thornwall stood up so fast, his chair toppled over. Cadet Morrison, why haven't you reported this to Galactic Defense Command? Jake blinked, looking genuinely confused. Sir, I filed a report about it 6 weeks ago. Standard Form 847-Delta, Threat Assessment and Response Protocol. I even included my recommended defensive strategies. The Admiral and I exchanged glances. Neither of us had seen any such report. "Lieutenant Zara!" I called out. My aide appeared in the doorway instantly. "Yes, Commander?" "Find Form 847-Delta filed by Cadet Morrison, dated 6 weeks ago." Zara's fingers danced over her datapad for a moment before she looked up with confusion. "Sir, the form was filed, but it's been sitting in the Academic Administration Office. Apparently, they thought it was a creative writing assignment." Jake snorted with laughter. "Creative writing?" I used proper military terminology, statistical analysis, and cross-referenced tactical assessments from 12 different sources. Zara continued. The filing clerk thought it was too detailed to be real. They marked it as Student Fiction Project and sent it to the Literature Department for grading. I felt my right eye begin to twitch. "So you're telling me that a genuine threat assessment about orbital bombardment has been sitting in the Literature Department for 6 weeks?" "Actually," Jake said helpfully, "Professor Milliken gave it an A+. She said my world building was exceptional, and my character development showed real promise." Admiral Thornwall sat down heavily, his chair creaking under his bulk. "This is insane." "This is humans," I corrected. "Everything about them is insane. But somehow it works." Jake's datapad chirped softly. He glanced at it and frowned. "Huh? That's interesting." "What now?" I asked, dreading the answer. "The Hegemony just moved up their timeline. Looks like today's incident spooked them. They're accelerating to tomorrow morning." The room went very quiet. Outside my office window, I could see cadets from a dozen different species going about their daily routines, completely unaware that their academy might be reduced to radioactive rubble in less than 18 hours. "How do you know this?" Admiral Thornwall asked weakly. Jake looked embarrassed. "I might have hacked their communication network a few months ago. You know, just to keep tabs on things. They use a really basic encryption system, probably because they think no one would be crazy enough to spy on them." "You hacked the Hegemony of Scales?" I felt my voice rise several octaves. "The most paranoid military organization in the galaxy." "It wasn't that hard. They're so convinced of their own superiority that they never expected a second-year cadet to break their codes. I just used some basic algorithms from my cryptography elective." Admiral Thornwall buried his face in his hands. "We're all going to die." "Not necessarily," Jake said cheerfully. "I've got a plan." Of course he did. "The Hegemony's strategy is simple," Jake continued, pulling up a holographic display from his datapad. 3 battle cruisers will drop out of hyperspace at coordinates Alpha 77, approximately 50,000 kilometers from the Academy. They'll achieve orbital position and commence bombardment using plasma torpedoes. The hologram showed the Academy's position relative to Kepler Prime, with 3 ominous red dots marking the attack ships. "Standard military doctrine," Admiral Thornwall nodded grimly. "Nothing we can do to stop 3 battle cruisers with our current defenses." Jake smiled that unsettling human smile again. "That's where you're wrong, Admiral. See, the Hegemony made the same mistake as today's assassin." "Which is?" "They underestimated the human capacity for creative problem-solving." Jake's fingers moved across his datapad, and suddenly the Academy's defensive systems display appeared in the air between us. But this wasn't the standard configuration I knew by heart. Over the past year, while everyone thought I was just a weird kid who spent too much time in the engineering labs, I've been making some modifications. The display zoomed in on the Academy's structure. What I saw made my blood run cold, but for entirely different reasons than before. "You've turned our school into a fortress," I whispered. "Not a fortress," Jake corrected. "A trap." The modifications were brilliant and completely insane. Jake had somehow managed to integrate the Academy's research facilities, power generators, and even the cafeteria equipment into a single, coordinated defense network. The particle physics lab can generate a localized electromagnetic field that will disrupt their targeting systems, Jake explained, highlighting different sections of his plan. The chemistry department has been brewing some very interesting compounds that, when properly deployed, can create atmospheric interference patterns. "And the cafeteria?" Admiral Thornwall asked, morbid fascination creeping into his voice. "Food synthesizers can be reconfigured as projectile launchers. Amazing what you can do with a few thousand meals worth of protein paste and some creative physics." I stared at the human cadet, trying to process what I was seeing. "You've weaponized the entire Academy." "I've optimized our available resources for maximum defensive capability," Jake corrected. "There's a difference." "What's the difference?" Jake grinned. "Mine works." The next morning arrived far too quickly. I stood in the Academy's command center, watching long-range sensors as 3 massive shapes dropped out of hyperspace exactly where Jake had predicted. The hegemony of scales was nothing if not punctual. Battle cruisers, dominant, inevitable, and crushing victory, have achieved orbital position, Lieutenant Zara reported. "They're powering up weapons systems." Around the command center, technicians from every department worked frantically at stations that had been hastily modified overnight. The entire Academy had been transformed into something that would have made military engineers weep with joy or terror. I wasn't sure which. Jake stood at the center of it all, coordinating the defense like he'd been doing this his entire life. His casual demeanor from yesterday had been replaced by cold, calculating focus. "Initiate Phase 1, Jake ordered. Across the Academy, the particle physics lab hummed to life. Massive electromagnetic coils that normally powered research experiments now generated a field that stretched out into near orbit. On the command screens, we watched as the Hegemony ship's targeting arrays began flickering and failing. "What are they seeing up there?" Admiral Thornwall asked. "According to their sensors, the Academy just vanished," Jake replied without looking up from his controls. "The electromagnetic field is creating false readings. They think they're targeting empty space." The lead battle cruiser, Dominant, fired a spread of plasma torpedoes at what their instruments told them was the Academy's location. The weapons sailed harmlessly past us, detonating in empty space several kilometers away. "Phase 2, Jake called out. The chemistry department's contribution activated next. Specialized atmospheric processors began releasing carefully designed compounds into Kepler Prime's upper atmosphere. Within minutes, the entire region around the Academy was shrouded in a swirling cloud of particles that played havoc with sensor readings. "Now they can't see us at all," Jake explained. "But, more importantly, they can't see this." He gestured to the main display, which showed dozens of small objects rising from the Academy's surface. At first glance, they looked like escape pods or emergency shuttles. "What are those?" I asked. "Decoys. Built them in advanced robotics class. Each one contains a small power source and a sensor package designed to mimic the energy signature of a battlecruiser." On the screen, we watched as Jake's decoys spread out across local space, each one broadcasting signals that would look like massive warships to the Hegemony's confused sensors. The enemy ships responded exactly as Jake had predicted. Confused by the electromagnetic interference and unable to distinguish real threats from fake ones, they began firing in all directions. Plasma torpedoes lit up the space around Kepler Prime like a deadly fireworks display. "They're shooting at shadows," Admiral Thornwall breathed. "Gets better," Jake said, activating Phase 3. The cafeteria systems came online with a mechanical roar that shook the entire academy. But, instead of dispensing meals, the food synthesizers began launching projectiles at incredible velocity. "What exactly are you firing at them?" I asked, watching the tactical display show dozens of small objects racing toward the enemy ships. "Protein paste formed into aerodynamically stable projectiles, mixed with some of the more volatile compounds from the chemistry lab," Jake replied. "Basically, exploding meatballs." I started laughing. I couldn't help it. The most feared military force in 3 sectors was being attacked by weaponized cafeteria food. "The beauty of it," Jake continued, "is that protein paste doesn't show up on military sensors. Their defensive systems are designed to intercept plasma bolts and kinetic projectiles, not lunch." The first wave of food projectiles struck the Hegemony ships, and the results were spectacular. Chemical reactions designed to enhance flavor turned into corrosive compounds that ate through armor plating. Explosions bloomed across the enemy hulls as modified meal ingredients found weak points in their defensive systems. "Dominant is losing power to their main weapons array," Lieutenant Zara reported, disbelief coloring her voice. "They're actually being damaged by cafeteria food." The Hegemony commander apparently decided that discretion was the better part of valor. The 3 battle cruisers began retreating from orbit, their sensors still overwhelmed by Jake's countermeasures. "Should we let them go?" Admiral Thornwall asked. Jake shook his head. "Not yet. They need to understand something important." He activated his communication system, broadcasting on all Hegemony frequencies. "Attention Hegemony of Scales Fleet. This is Cadet Jake Morrison of the Nexus Defense Academy. I believe you came here to kill me?" The response came almost immediately, delivered in the harsh, guttural language of the Hegemony. "Human whelp, your father's crimes will not go unpunished." "My father's crimes are his own," Jake replied calmly. "But you made a mistake coming here. We will return with a full battle fleet. Your academy will burn." Jake's voice took on a harder edge. "No, you won't. Because if you ever threaten this academy again, I'll do something that will make today look like a gentle warning. You are one human child. What could you possibly do?" Jake smiled, and even I felt a chill run down my spine. "I'll graduate." The communication channel went silent. After a long moment, the Hegemony ships jumped back into hyperspace, fleeing the system as fast as their drives could carry them. In the sudden quiet of the command center, I looked around at the modified equipment, the exhausted technicians, and the human cadet, who had just defeated 3 battle cruisers with homework assignments and cafeteria supplies. "Jake," I said finally, "what exactly are you planning to do after graduation?" Jake Morrison, the son of Admiral Morrison, the kid who had just turned an assassination attempt into a teaching moment and an orbital bombardment into a food fight, looked at me with those unsettling human eyes. "I'm thinking about going into diplomacy, Commander. Turns out I have a talent for resolving conflicts." I decided right then that I needed a very long vacation, somewhere far away from humans and their terrifying capacity for turning the impossible into the inevitable. But first, I had some reports to file. 17 assassination plots, multiple security modifications, and 1 successful defense against orbital bombardment. Just another day at the Nexus Defense Academy. Though I suspected that once word spread about what had happened here, applications from human cadets were going to increase dramatically. The galaxy had no idea what it was in for.